Back in the late 80s, I was neck-deep in addiction. The thrill of experimenting and partying had worn off long ago. All that remained was the endless loop of keeping the habit going and chasing another fix. That road led me to rock bottom, broke without a place to stay. That place ended up being the Pine Barrens. Anyone from the Mid-Atlantic knows about them. For those who don't, the Barrens are a massive stretch of woods, over 1 million acres, spanning much of southern New Jersey. Most of it's preserved land, teeming with wildlife and soaked in myth. For someone like me, they were perfect. If you knew how to get by outdoors, and if, like me, you were avoiding warrants, there was more than enough space to vanish into. You could shift camp from spot to spot, never staying in one place for too long. Even better for me, I had a contact. He'd set up a meth lab in an old, beat-up shed way out in the woods. Hidden, quiet, perfect for both cooking and disappearing. It was the lowest point of my life. I won't paint it as anything else. I'm not going to dress it up or make it seem like some kind of cool outlaw tale. There was nothing positive in it. Not even the lies I might have told myself at the time. But one thing did stand out. The wilderness, no matter how bad things were, was incredible. Even strung out and barely keeping it together, I couldn't ignore the beauty. Still, as gorgeous as the Pine Barrens were during the day, they changed entirely at night. Once the sun dipped down, the place didn't feel the same. It felt off. It was like you weren't welcome anymore. The woods stretched wider somehow, endless, like a door had opened and you were swallowed up. What you thought you knew vanished, replaced by something darker, something older. I wasn't the only one out there. I'd been staying in the woods for around 6 months, but others had been there much longer. They all lived by one rule: don't wander after dark. I wasn't from that area, so I hadn't grown up hearing the tales, but it didn't take long to start picking them up, especially the one about the cursed child, the 13th born to Mother Leeds. She'd cursed it before it came into the world, and something had apparently listened. The story goes that it shot out of her, flew up the chimney, and vanished into the barrens. I even remembered the little rhyme, * old Ma Leeds, mean and cold, cursed her child in stories told. Darkness heard and came alive, born of smoke and flame to thrive. Watch the pines, beware the cry, the devil roams when night is nigh. *. It seemed like everyone I met out there had a story. Every one of them claimed they'd seen it, the creature they called the Jersey Devil. I was too fried, too lost in my own spiral to believe any of those tall tales. Until I did. It was late September, maybe early October. My sense of time back then wasn't great. The weather was turning, though. Mornings carried frost, and the nights had bite. My withdrawals were hitting hard. My hookup had been arrested, and I hadn't found another source. I felt like death. My joints screamed. I could barely lift myself off the ground. And by the second day, without anything, the paranoia hit. People don't realize how intense it is when you're coming down. It's not just while you're using, withdrawal brings its own demons. That night, I hadn't slept in days. My thoughts raced, mostly circling around the busted lab and my guy getting caught. What if he'd turned me in? What if the cops were out in the woods, looking for me? I moved camp twice that day, going deeper each time. Finally, I found a spot so far in, I didn't even know where I was anymore. That brought some relief. If I didn't know where I was, then nobody else did either. I cleared out a small space, pitched my tent, and started a tiny fire, just enough for heat, not enough for smoke. Still, I couldn't sleep. I sat there, hours passing, eyes locked on the shadows beyond the flames. The silence felt good, soothing even. Then I heard it. A soft pop, crunch, twigs breaking underfoot, far off. But the sound came from high up, from the trees. Cops don't climb trees. I told myself it was probably a raccoon, or maybe an owl hopping from limb to limb. But the noise got louder, heavier. Not light scampering, but thick limbs cracking under serious weight. Then came a thunderous crash. Something big hit the ground. I sprang up, body tense and ready to bolt, though I didn't know where to go. I was locked in place, every muscle drawn tight. Then nothing. Silence again. I held still, then reached for my flashlight and slowly edged into the dark, careful not to shine the beam too far or too long. I only needed enough light to avoid faceplanting into a tree. I moved maybe 20 yards and saw a patch of the forest littered with massive fallen branches. That's when I heard the snorting. I dropped low, heart pounding. The snorting got louder. I clicked the flashlight back on and gave a quick sweep. Branches, tree trunks. Then I shifted and swept in the other direction. That's when I saw it. Something big, white. I couldn't tell what at first, and I quickly covered the light. My breath caught in my throat. It snorted again. The sound was strange, but not threatening. Familiar, even. I slowly stood up and let the flashlight beam shine fully on the thing. A giant white horse stood there, its back turned to me. I exhaled, feeling some of the fear slip away. But that feeling didn't last long. Its mane and tail were tangled with sticks and leaves, like it had been crashing through the woods for hours. Turned its head, slowly, to look at me. Its eyes didn't reflect the light. They glowed, red. The horse screamed, a sharp, violent shriek, and rose on its hind legs. Then it dropped down hard and charged me like a freight train. I dove to the side just as it tore past me, its hooves smashing through brush like a bulldozer. My flashlight flew from my hand. I hit the ground, ribs aching, dirt in my mouth. I scrambled to grab the light, swung the beam side to side. Nothing, just trees. It was gone. Not hidden, not running, just gone. I stared into the dark, breathing hard, chest rising and falling. Nothing moved. The woods had gone still again. Too still. I backed out slowly, heart racing, every inch of me wanting to run. I returned to my tent, packed everything up, and started hiking toward the edge of the forest. I wanted out. I needed out. But something followed me. I couldn't shake the feeling. Eyes were on me. Every time I turned my head, I thought I caught a flicker of movement. Then I heard something. A soft whoosh high above. The treetops. No wind, just that strange sound. I pointed my light upward. The tops of a few trees swayed gently, but only the ones directly above me. Then the cracking started again. Closer, louder. Something was moving through the canopy. Fast. I ran. Branches rained down on me as whatever it was passed directly overhead. A huge crash up ahead shook the ground under my feet. I skidded to a stop. My forehead felt warm, blood, from a branch maybe. I covered my flashlight again and listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No breathing. Just stillness. I stood there a long while, tense, breathing fog into the air. And then I saw it, just a few feet ahead. That same massive white shape. But this time the light caught it, and it started to shift. His coat turned black. Blacker than anything I'd seen. His glowing red eyes locked onto mine. From its forehead, something began to push through, sharp points breaking the skin. Antlers. Thick, jagged antlers. Its back split open, skin peeling apart like it was unzipping, revealing huge, skeletal wings. I can't describe what that did to me. My mind couldn't handle it. It was unreal, but it was real. I felt small, insignificant, powerless. And then it lunged. Everything went black. When I came to, it was daylight. Birds chirped. Leaves rustled. My flashlight was in my hand. Battery drained. My pack was still on my back. I was in the same spot as before. No sign of the horse. No antlers. No wings. Just the woods. I made my way out of the forest, stumbling, shaken, and walked straight to the nearest police station. I turned myself in. My warrants were still active, and I knew jail was the only place I'd feel safe from whatever that was. I served my time, got clean, put myself through school. I earned a degree in library science. I'm a librarian now, but not in Jersey. I still tell people that story. I don't know if what I saw was real. Maybe it was a withdrawal-induced trip, but it felt real. More real than anything I've ever experienced. And it changed me, whether it was an actual creature or something my brain made up. It scared me straight. When you choose to live in darkness, don't be surprised when something dark finds you. And ask yourself, does it really matter if the monster is real or imagined? Either way, it leaves a mark. Most days, you'll find me working extra hours at a limousine manufacturing facility in Indiana. I used to be all about hunting. Spent nearly every weekend out in the forest tracking deer or going after small game. But a few years back, I got bit by a tick and ended up with alpha-gal syndrome. If that doesn't ring a bell, it's an allergy that makes you react badly to red meat. It really messes with your body. Picture being a hunter who can't eat what they bring home. Frustrating doesn't even come close. I never got into hunting birds, and while poultry is usually okay with the allergy, the whole idea of hunting lost its meaning after that. So I put away my rifle for good. Instead, I got into wilderness survival and deep forest camping. No way some cursed little bug was going to take the outdoors away from me. At one point, I even thought about turning my time in nature into a kind of self-help book. Maybe a guide for folks looking to reconnect with the wild or figure themselves out. You know, the kind of thing people seem to be chasing these days. One autumn, I took a full week off from the plant and headed into the Timber Hollow Forest in western Pennsylvania. I'd been there before, but always stuck to the well-marked trails. This time, I wanted to go deeper, off the usual paths. I got my gear together and drove out to a spot where I could safely leave my truck without worrying it would get messed with. The first few days were perfect. The temperature wasn't too cold. The trees were turning beautiful shades of rust and gold, and the air smelled like pine and damp earth. I hiked for hours without seeing another human. Eventually, I set up camp by a narrow creek. I caught some trout. Fish doesn't set off the allergy, and took in the quiet. At night, I jotted down ideas for the book, though not much came of it. Mostly, I just sat by the fire and let my thoughts drift while watching the flames. On the third day, I chose to head farther north. I'd heard there were untouched old-growth forests that way, with trees centuries old. I figured they might spark something meaningful I could write about. I packed a light bag and marked my trail carefully so I wouldn't get lost. Around midday, I wandered into a clearing I didn't expect. It wasn't on any map I brought. The trees gave way to a near-perfect circle of open space. This is where things got strange. Right there in the center of the clearing, I saw them. A group of animals sitting together like they were having some strange meeting. A deer, a rabbit, a fox, and a young black bear, all gathered in a tight circle. It made no sense. I stopped in my tracks, stunned. Predators and prey just don't hang out like that. But none of them moved, not even a blink. At first, I thought maybe they were sculptures or some weird art display. But as I crept closer, I noticed their fur shifting with the breeze. Their eyes were open, yet they didn't seem to notice me. I can't describe how wrong it all felt. These animals were sitting peacefully, way too close to each other, not acting like wild animals at all. I considered grabbing my phone for a photo, but something about the moment made me hesitate. Plus, I had no reception and barely any battery left. I took a few careful steps forward, but stopped cold when the bear turned its head just a little in my direction. It didn't growl or seem threatening, but I wasn't about to test my luck. I've got enough sense to respect wild animals, especially bears. "All right then," I muttered, backing away slowly. I retraced my steps to camp, thoroughly unsettled. The whole thing left me feeling off. On my way back, I tried to come up with a reason. Maybe they were sick. Maybe someone left drugged food out. But who would do that way out here? My best guess? Some kind of natural gas leak. Something seeping up from underground, messing with their heads. Made about as much sense as anything. That night, the woods felt too quiet. No chirping bugs, no hooting owls. Just the occasional pop of the campfire and a bit of breeze. I couldn't sleep, so I sat up scribbling in my notebook, though nothing really came to mind. Around midnight, I heard something moving nearby. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it out into the darkness, but I couldn't see anything. Probably a possum, I told myself, but the noise kept circling around my campsite. It was slow and steady, not the usual quick shuffle of an animal. "Who's out there?" I called. Nothing. I stoked the fire higher, hoping the extra light would be enough. After a while, the sounds faded, and I finally nodded off sometime before sunrise. By morning, I'd had enough of whatever was going on. Maybe it was just bad sleep, or maybe the isolation was messing with me, though that had never happened before. Either way, I figured it was time to leave. I packed up and started the hike back toward the truck. About an hour down the trail, something ahead caught my attention. As I got closer, my stomach flipped. It was a rabbit. Not just any rabbit, looked almost exactly like the one from the clearing. Lying still in the dirt. No obvious wounds, but its eyes were gone. Just two empty hollows staring at nothing. I bent down for a closer look but didn't touch it. No blood, no paw prints, nothing to show what had killed it. It was like someone had just scooped out its eyes and walked away. I shivered, scanned the forest around me. Suddenly, I didn't feel so alone. I picked up my pace. A few 100 feet farther, I came across another one. This time it was the fox. Same condition, completely still, eyes missing, rest of the body untouched. "This can't be real," I whispered. I debated going back, but heading deeper into the woods didn't feel any better. So I kept moving, quick but not quite running. Then I found the deer, the doe from the circle. She was lying on her side, right in the middle of the trail like someone had placed her there. Eyes gone, body clean. No cuts, no struggle. Was someone out here leaving these animals for me to find? If so, what kind of message were they sending? I gripped my knife tighter. Not that I thought it would help much. I just kept going. Eventually, I reached the bear. It was off the trail, slumped against a tree like a giant stuffed toy. Same empty eye sockets. Same untouched body. Same awful silence. Whoever's doing this, it's not funny. I yelled out to the trees. No reply. I didn't wait around. I started jogging, then sprinting. No more worrying about being quiet, I just wanted out. That last part of the hike was a blur. When I finally saw my truck through the trees, I almost cried. I threw my pack in the back, jumped into the driver's seat, and sped off like my life depended on it. Honestly, it might have. Only once I hit the main road did I start to breathe normally again. My mind was racing. Who could have done all that? Why leave those animals in my path? A week later, I decided to talk to someone. I met up with my buddy Nate. We'd known each other since school. He's one of those people who stays calm but listens without judging. Over a couple beers, I laid it all out. Everything. He sat there, serious, not saying anything until I finished. Then he said, "That's messed up. You think someone was screwing with you?" "I honestly don't know," I told him. "But who would go to that much trouble? And how would they even know I'd be out there?" He shrugged. "Could be some cult thing. You hear stories sometimes. Weird things happening out in the wild." "Yeah, maybe. You going back out there?" I shook my head. "Not for a while." He nodded. "Probably smart. Honestly, that's what got me reading those missing 411 stories. Those strange disappearances with no explanations. Freaked me out, but weirdly, it also made me want to go back someday. Maybe something wanted me gone. Maybe it wasn't even aimed at me. I can't explain it. But I do know I'm not going to let one creepy trip in one patch of woods keep me from the wild forever. A stupid tick and a meat allergy nearly ended that part of my life. But not this. Not this. I'm kind of a thrill seeker and love wandering off normal trails, checking out places most folks wouldn't give a second glance. A few years back, I set off on a solo camping trip deep in the forests of northern Washington. I won't name the exact area, mostly because I doubt I could ever find it again even if I tried. I headed out early on a Saturday morning. I packed up my bag with my tent, some food for a few days, and a map that was more for decoration than anything else. I've always trusted my own sense of direction over paper guides. It took a couple hours of hiking before I reached the spot I wanted to camp at, a quiet area near a small stream. As the sun started to set, I got everything set up. The next morning, I decided to veer off the barely visible trail I'd been following, heading further into the forest. The ground got rougher, the trees denser, but that just made it more interesting. Around midday, I noticed something man-made through the trees. Curiosity got the best of me, so I kept going. When I stepped out from the thick woods, I was stunned. Right in front of me was what looked like a tiny, old-fashioned town. I didn't know what to think. There were maybe 10 or 12 buildings along a dusty road, a barber shop, a small market, even what looked like a town hall. They were worn-looking but not run down. In fact, everything looked surprisingly intact. It was like walking into a Western film set, except there wasn't a single person around. I shouted to see if anyone was nearby, but the only thing that came back was the echo of my own voice. I carefully walked along the street, peeking into the windows. The barbershop had a row of chairs but no tools or mirrors. The market had shelves but nothing on them. It gave me a weird feeling. I figured maybe it had once been a roadside attraction or a mock-up for tourists that had been shut down. But why wasn't it listed on any maps? And why did everything look untouched? No graffiti, no signs of weathering, no trash. As I stood there, trying to make sense of it all, a deep, loud noise rang out. It was like a foghorn, low and powerful. But we weren't even close to the coast. Came out of nowhere and I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I spun around, covering my ears, waiting for it to end. After about 10 seconds, it cut off suddenly, leaving behind a much heavier silence. That's when I heard a different sound. A fast clicking, like claws tapping against a hard floor. It was quiet at first, but definitely getting louder and closer. I tried to pinpoint where it was coming from, but every time I turned, the sound seemed to move. My chest tightened, and I knew it was time to go. I started moving back the way I came, but the sound followed, quicker and sharper now. I looked back, nothing. But the feeling that something was watching me was so strong, I picked up my pace. The sound picked up too. I spotted a building that looked like a small corner shop and bolted for it. The door wasn't locked, thankfully. I shut it fast and twisted the bolt, backing up while trying to catch my breath. Inside, it looked just like the other buildings. Shelves were bare, the coolers were running but empty. No drinks, no snacks, not even junk mail lying around. It was as if the place had been built, stocked with shelves, then never actually used. I tried to stay calm, telling myself maybe I'd stumbled into some closed-down development project. Maybe it was private property. But none of that explained the noise I'd heard. I peeked out the front window, nothing moving. As it got later, my nerves started to wear down. I thought about making a run for it, but held off. Whatever was out there seemed faster than me. I found a spot behind the counter where I could hide but still see the entrance. Night fell, and the only light came through the grimy glass from the moon outside. Then I heard scratching. It was light at first, like something gently dragging across the wood outside. But it got louder, more forceful. Something was circling the building, claws scraping the outside walls. I pulled my pocket knife out, but deep down I knew it wouldn't do me much good. The sound shifted to the windows, then the front door. The knob jiggled. I held my breath, frozen in place. After a minute or so, the noises moved away from the door, but they didn't stop. Whatever it was kept pacing, dragging its claws now and then. At some point, I must have fallen asleep because I woke up to a loud crash. The front door had been smashed open. The lock was busted, the door hanging off the hinge. I didn't move. Heavy steps echoed inside, slow and steady, followed by a low growl that filled the whole building. I'd never heard anything like it. Then came a kind of wet hissing sound, like sniffing, almost like a snake or something lizard-like. It made my skin crawl. I stayed crouched behind the counter, trying to slow my breathing. The clawed feet were moving slowly through the aisles. The floor creaked under the weight of whatever it was. Then it stopped, and the quiet that followed was worse than the noise. I couldn't even bring myself to peek. I was bracing for the worst when that foghorn sound blared again, louder than before. The thing let out a screech, a shrill, horrible scream, and then ran. I listened as the claws scuttled away, fading off into the distance. I didn't wait. I grabbed my bag and moved out from behind the counter. Everything was still again, but I wasn't going to stick around. I stepped back into the empty street and took off running toward the woods. I didn't bother finding the path. I just wanted to get out. Eventually, the first hints of daylight showed through the trees. I slowed down, exhausted. I found another creek and splashed my face, trying to calm down. I tried to get my bearings, but I was completely off track. Took the rest of the day to find my way back to where I'd parked. I collapsed into the driver's seat, more thankful than I'd ever been to see my old car. I drove straight to the nearest town without stopping. I told a few close friends what had happened. One of them, I'll call him R, suggested we go back with better equipment. Cameras, GPS, maybe even a drone. I was scared to return, but part of me really wanted to prove I wasn't losing it. So a couple weeks later, we went back. We packed every tool we could think of and set out early. I tried to retrace every step I'd taken. We hiked for 3 full days, covering more distance than I thought we could. But no matter how far we went, we couldn't find that town again. No open clearings, no buildings, not even a trail that looked familiar. Our GPS said we were in the same general area, but the landscape didn't match what I'd seen before. I started to wonder if I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe I had hit my head and dreamed it all, but that didn't sit right. I knew what I saw. That town had been real. Even R said maybe I just got turned around, or if it was some kind of movie set, maybe it had already been taken apart. I still can't make sense of it. It felt too real to be in my head. But then again, why would it vanish without a trace? And more importantly, what was the point of that place? Why was it there to begin with? What did that sound mean? And what the hell was making those clawing footsteps? The older I get, the less I bring up my childhood spent up in the hills. Not because anything bad happened, but because some things are just hard to explain. I'm 66 now, and after recently coming across this show, I figured I'd finally share my story. I grew up in a small wooden house tucked deep in the Ozark foothills. Back then, there weren't any nearby neighbors. The closest ones were the Harris family, living almost a mile down the gravel road. Life was basic. We raised chickens, had a couple of goats, and grew most of our food in a large vegetable garden. But there was always this strange feeling hanging in the air. My folks were strict about certain things, and as kids, we didn't question them. One rule was that we couldn't be outside after sundown, no matter what. If we were out playing and the sun began to dip, Mom would ring this old metal bell, and we knew to get inside right away. I remember once asking why we couldn't catch fireflies like other kids did. She just gave me a serious look and said, "There are things out there you don't want to run into, Mary." We also weren't allowed to go into the forest alone. The woods started right at the edge of our backyard, and it was hard to resist the urge to explore. My brother Tommy and I would sneak in during the day sometimes, but we never went too far. There was this silent understanding between us. We could feel that those trees held secrets we weren't supposed to uncover. Not yet anyway. One summer when I was about 9, our Uncle Dale came for a visit. He wasn't really our uncle, more like a second cousin of my dad's, but we called him Uncle. Dale was cheerful, laid back, always up for a laugh, and didn't seem too concerned with all the precautions our parents took. One evening, he suggested we set up camp in the yard. "The stars are bright, and the weather's perfect," he said. Tommy and I were thrilled. We begged our parents to let us, and after some back and forth, they agreed, but only if Dale stayed out there with us. We pitched an old canvas tent in the center of the yard, built a small fire, and roasted marshmallows. It was the best night we'd had in a while. Around 9, Mama came out and told us to keep the fire low and reminded Dale to watch us closely. He just laughed and said we'd be all right. Sometime during the night, I woke up to a rustling sound just outside the tent. At first, I thought it was the wind or maybe a raccoon, but then I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, and steady, moving in a circle around us. Tommy was awake too. I could hear his breathing go still. Dale sat up, held a finger to his lips, and told us without words to stay quiet. The footsteps kept moving, sometimes stopping right at the front of the tent. Then came a growl, low, deep, and nothing like any animal I'd ever heard in those hills. It wasn't a bear, not a dog, and definitely not a coyote. My stomach turned from fear. We sat frozen together while whatever it was kept walking around us, occasionally brushing against the tent's fabric with its claws. At one point, we saw a shadow move between the tent and the dying firelight. It was huge, hunched, and looked like it had pointed ears and a long muzzle. Dale quietly reached for his hunting knife and clutched it, but didn't dare go outside. Eventually, everything went quiet. We didn't move a muscle until the sky began to lighten and morning broke. When we finally stepped out, there were deep tracks all around the tent, much too big for any dog, and the stride was longer than a man's. Dale told us to keep it to ourselves, said telling our folks would just scare them. But of course, Mama seemed to know something had gone on. When we came inside, she looked at Dale, and he just gave her a small nod. After that, things got stricter. No more camping outside, even with grown-ups. Over the months that followed, other strange things began to happen. First, our chickens started vanishing. We thought maybe a fox or a possum got to them, but there were never any feathers, no blood, and no signs of anything breaking in. They were just gone. Dad added more locks to the chicken house and even put metal bars over the windows. But one morning, we found the door wide open, even though all the locks were still there, just unlatched, like someone with fingers had opened them. Every last chicken was missing. What really stood out was a clump of rough, black fur we found nearby. It didn't match any creature we knew of. Dad took the fur to the sheriff in town, but no one could tell what animal it belonged to. That night, we heard howling from deep in the trees, but it wasn't the kind of howling we were used to. Not coyotes, not wolves. It was longer, lower, and sent a chill down your spine. I remember looking out my bedroom window and seeing shadows moving near the edge of the woods. Big ones moving fast between the trees. The next day, Mama sat us all down and went over the rules again. No being outside after dark. No going into the woods alone. And if we saw or heard anything unusual, we were to come straight in and tell her or Dad. We kids tried to make sense of it in our own way. We whispered about creatures and monsters, about things that lived in the forest. Tommy once swore he saw glowing eyes watching him from the woods at night. When he told Mama, she hushed him right away and told him not to go around telling stories. One evening in the fall, right before dusk, I was out picking apples from a tree near the house. I knew I should have gone in sooner, but I wanted just a few more for a pie. That's when I heard movement behind me. I turned and saw a large figure moving through the trees. It walked on two legs but was hunched over. It had thick fur and eyes that caught the dimming light in a way that didn't feel natural. I dropped the basket and ran back to the house, heart pounding. When I told Mama, she didn't scold me for staying out too long. She locked every door and window, then had us all sit in the living room together. Dad took his place near the front door, shotgun across his knees, saying nothing. We stayed like that for hours, listening to the occasional snap of twigs or a distant howl. Eventually, we were told to head to bed, with Mama reassuring us everything would be fine. After that, things quieted down. No more howls, no more missing animals. It was like whatever had been out there had moved on. Life slowly returned to what felt normal, but we still followed all the same rules. Years later, when I had kids of my own, I asked Mama about those days. Even then, she hesitated, but she finally said the mountains held their own mysteries. She admitted they'd suspected something, maybe like a werewolf was stalking the woods, but she never wanted to scare us more than we already were. Looking back, I still get shivers when I think about it. I don't know what it really was, but I do know it wasn't human, even though it walked like one. And whatever it was, it seemed to leave us alone as long as we followed the rules. Now, when my grandkids come visit and ask for spooky stories, I tell them about those mountain days and why it's important to listen to your elders. I skip the worst parts, no need to scare them too much, but I make sure they understand that this world is full of strange things, and even if we live to be old, we might never truly understand them. When I was 19, my older cousin and a few of his buddies spent a week out in the woods. We rented a cabin through a vacation app, tucked away in a fairly isolated spot. It was the middle of summer, and none of us had school. I had just graduated from high school, and I was supposed to start college later that year. My cousin and his friends were getting ready for their final year at university. The cabin was a small, one-story place with a decent front porch. There were a few old wooden chairs lined up by the front door. The whole place had this quiet charm to it, and with those chairs, I could imagine a couple of grandparents sitting there in the evening. The cabin was surrounded by thick woods, and the closest neighbor was a long distance away. My cousin's friend Nick was driving, so he picked everyone up since we were all living in the same town. He had a compact SUV that we figured would be good for the rough roads, though the drive turned out to be easier than we thought. Most of the way was on paved highways, and only the last stretch, maybe the final 45 minutes, was on dirt paths. Even then, the roads were in decent shape and not hard to handle. We got there on a Monday afternoon, unloaded our stuff, and got settled in. The place only had one bedroom, but there was a pull-out sofa. I had brought my sleeping mat so I could crash on the floor. That first day was mostly about getting to know the area, checking out the nearby trails, and just hanging out. My cousin and I took a long walk on one of the trails, maybe an hour and a half out and back, and we ended up way out in the woods. We came across a road that seemed old, but there were tire marks on it that looked fairly recent. It wasn't marked on any of the maps we had, which threw us off. Maybe it wasn't listed because it had been abandoned or was private land, but either way, someone had clearly used it not too long ago. We didn't run into anyone, and after a while, we went back to meet up with the others. That first night, we made a fire in the pit behind the cabin. I had never been all that into nature stuff, so this was a fun change for me. The sky was clear, and I could see more stars than I'd ever seen before. It was beautiful, but there was also something a little unsettling about being out there, with all the noises coming from the woods around us. We heard rustling here and there, along with the occasional owl calling off in the distance. Eventually, we headed inside, locked up, and got ready for bed. It was already pretty late, sometime after midnight. The next day was much like the first. A few of the guys wanted to go check out a nearby lake, so we did that and then had another fire that night. Later, after we went to bed, I started hearing odd sounds outside. I was lying on my mat next to the back window and picked up on a faint rustle. It wasn't super loud, but I could tell it wasn't just the wind. I was trying not to think much of it, but then it got louder, like something was moving through the brush nearby. My cousin was asleep on the pull-out couch about 10 feet from me, and he'd heard it earlier too. He thought it was probably a raccoon or a deer. I was more worried that it might be a bear. Felt like whatever it was getting closer. After a while, I think everyone else had fallen asleep, because when I glanced around, it looked like I was the only one still awake. I checked my phone. It was 2 a.m. That's when I heard very clear, deliberate footsteps moving outside the cabin. I didn't know what a bear walking sounded like, so I couldn't say for sure what it was, just from the sound alone. Still, I was curious, so I slowly got up to my knees and peeked through the window above me. I could definitely make out something moving, though it was dark and hard to see clearly. It looked like a person, but that didn't make any sense, so I told myself it was probably just a big animal. The next morning, I didn't mention anything to anyone, but I was still wondering about it, so I decided to check outside for tracks. I walked around the side of the cabin where I thought I had seen something, looking for any kind of animal prints, but all I could find were shoe marks, and they all seemed to belong to us. That evening, the four of us were sitting around the small round table in the kitchen eating dinner. It wasn't quite dark outside yet, but it would be soon. We were planning to build another fire and relax with some drinks. Just as we were finishing our food, I happened to glance out the window, and I saw someone step out from the edge of the trees, slowly making their way toward the cabin. We all stood up quickly and looked outside. There was a man, kind of ragged-looking, walking with a noticeable limp. He stopped maybe 20 feet from the porch and just stood there, staring. Nick grabbed a flashlight but didn't turn it on right away. He stepped out onto the porch and called out, "Do you need something?" But the man didn't answer. He didn't say a word, just stood there watching us. After what felt like forever, the man finally turned around and walked back into the woods, still without saying anything. We watched him disappear into the trees, and then immediately went around locking every door and window. None of us slept much that night. We stayed up talking for most of it. The man hadn't done anything openly threatening, but the whole thing was deeply unsettling. The scariest part, for me, was thinking he might have been out there the night before, moving around near the cabin while we were sleeping. The following morning, we packed everything up and got ready to leave. None of us wanted to spend another night there after what had happened. On the drive back, my cousin messaged the property owner to explain why we were leaving early and asked if we could get a refund for the nights we didn't stay. The owner responded saying no one else should have been nearby and promised to check into it. He did give us a refund for the last couple of nights, though I'm not sure he really took it all that seriously. We never figured out who the guy was. Maybe someone from the area just trying to scare people, or maybe someone not fully right in the head. But the fact that he may have been creeping around while we were all sleeping freaked me out more than anything. If he had really wanted to hurt us or rob the place, he had the perfect chance, but instead, he just stood there watching us. We never got any real answers, and I doubt we ever will. I grew up way out in the Pine Ridge Mountains of northern Vermont. Our family home was far from the closest town, tucked into a wooden cabin my grandfather had built with his own hands. This was years ago. We lived off the land, raising our own food and hunting to get by. As a kid, I loved how free the forest felt. I'd often sleep outside in the yard or take overnight hikes with my older brother, Nathan. One summer, when I was around 12, Nathan and I decided to camp out by a nearby lake, a spot we'd been to a bunch of times. It was a decent 3-hour hike from our cabin, but we knew the paths like the backs of our hands. We packed a few snacks and our sleeping bags and hit the trail early in the day. The sky was clear, and it was warm out. We made it to the lake by midday, set up a little tent, and spent the afternoon fishing and throwing rocks across the water. As the sun dipped behind the trees, we got a fire going, roasted some marshmallows, and traded creepy stories, each trying to freak the other out. Around 10 p.m., we decided to call it a night. The fire was burning low, and the woods had gone quiet, the kind of silence you only get when you're really out in the middle of nowhere. Just as we were sliding into our sleeping bags, I heard someone whistling. But it wasn't just random notes, it was a tune I recognized. An old lullaby our mom used to sing to us, called Starpath Dream. I thought maybe our parents had come to check in on us, which would have been odd since they usually trusted us to be fine on our own. "Hey Nathan, do you hear that?" I asked him. "Yeah, but who'd be out here whistling that?" We stepped outside the tent and looked around. The moon was bright enough that we could see across the lake and into the trees, but there wasn't anyone out there. "Maybe it's the wind," I said. Nathan shook his head. "Wind doesn't play songs." The sound kept going, floating from just beyond the tree line. It didn't seem rushed, just the same tune, again and again, steady and even. But something about it made me uneasy. "I think we should just ignore it," Nathan said. "Could be a traveler or someone wandering through." We went back into the tent, but the whistling didn't go away. It started circling us, first from one side, then the other. It never got closer or farther, just stayed the same distance, like whoever it was knew exactly how to stay out of view. After about an hour, the tune changed. It was still something that felt familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. Like a song we should know, but didn't. That's when Nathan admitted he was getting nervous. "This isn't normal," he said. "Maybe we should just head back." It was late, and hiking back in the dark wasn't the safest idea. But something about staying didn't sit right either. We grabbed what we really needed, left the tent to get later, and started back with our flashlights. As we walked, the whistling followed. No matter how fast we moved, it kept the same distance. We called out now and then, asking if anyone was there, but no one ever answered. Just that tune, over and over. About halfway home, we reached a fork in the trail. That's when the whistling stopped. All at once, the silence was almost worse. We froze, listening, barely breathing. Then, from the direction we were about to take, came a different sound, low humming, like someone quietly singing without words. "Let's go the other way," Nathan whispered. "That'll add another hour," I said. "I don't care. I've got a bad feeling." I didn't argue. We took the longer path. As we got farther, the humming faded. We finally got home just as the sun was starting to rise. Our mom was surprised to see us, but didn't ask much. Probably just assumed we changed our plans. We never told our parents about the whistling. Nathan and I didn't even talk to each other about it after that. But a week later, word got around that a man had gone missing near that same lake. Search teams went out, but they never found him. People said he was an experienced outdoorsman, someone who knew the area well. It didn't add up. Years passed. I moved away after I finished school. Nathan stayed and took over the cabin after our parents died. A few months back, I visited him. One night, after a couple beers, he brought it up. "You ever think about that night?" he asked. I told him I did. A lot. He said he went back there the week before. "Why would you do that?" I asked. "Don't know. Just wanted to hear it again." And the second I got close to the lake, it started. Same tune. Same whistle. "Did you see anybody this time?" I asked. He said he didn't stick around long enough to find out. We sat there in quiet for a bit before he added that he'd done some reading. Turns out that old lullaby our mom used to sing, it was part of a really old folk story. Something about wanderers being drawn into the forest by spirits. "Why would Mom sing that to us?" I asked. Maybe she didn't know where it came from. Or maybe she did. I haven't gone back to the Pine Ridge Mountains in years. But every now and then, late at night, I think I hear faint whistling outside my window. I tell myself I'm just imagining it. Still, I always keep the curtains closed. I don't know what we ran into out there. Maybe it was just some weird loner messing with us. But that doesn't explain how the sound kept following us, or why that man disappeared. All I know is, there's something out in those woods that doesn't belong.